Welcome to episode 8. This is the final episode in this digital illustration series. It's been a pleasure making this series for you. This final video contains hints and tips and slightly different methods on how you can create your inking, line work and how to colour your artwork. Once more I'll be using Adobe Illustrator to demonstrate my methods. There will also be a section on how you can use a texture, bring it into Photoshop and save it out as a bitmap TIFF, which you could then use as a texture layer in Illustrator and use it for your vector background graphics. This will add texture and interest to the background of your compositions and will help your artwork look more professional. Let's take a look at the video.
Hello and welcome to this extra episode with some tips and tricks that I would like to share with you before we close this series up. So the first thing I want to show is, as you can see, I've got the scan visible. I'm going to create a new layer above the scan. So you can see we've got all the colouring and inking layers above. These are all locked at the moment and they're all hidden. If I reveal the top one, you can see that's where we got to. But I'm going to just do a new layer here to demonstrate a different method on the inking process. So basically before we used the brush tool, and if I just go to the pen, select the variable brush that we created earlier, pressure sensitive, so I can make it go thick and thin by the amount of pressure that I put on the pen. So if I just Control Z, I just want to demonstrate something to you that we did. So previously we would do this as an inking process like this. So that would be part of the inking process that I showed you earlier, which is absolutely fine. So there we go. But if I use Control Y on the keyboard, that shows you the outline view of everything we're creating at the moment. So the big square is the scanned image, so obviously there's no vector details for it to show other than the bounding box. And then there's the strokes that we just created. And these are strokes. It's a stroke, it's recorded the line that I've drawn, and then it's added what looks like a fill, but it's a stroke of varying thickness. So if I Control Y to go back to normal, as you can see, that's how we've created it as a stroke. And it's not the best way of doing it. I just showed you it at the beginning just to get you started without having to think too much about what's going on, but I just want to show you, if you go to the brush tool, instead of just pressing B, you can hold down Shift B to select a blob brush. Now if I just go to the lasso tool now and just draw around what we've just done, just so that I can move it to one side. So if I hit V and then just click and drag this out of the way, and if I now do Shift B for the blob brush tool, this is not based around strokes, but it's based around fills. It creates a fill. So if I just do a and then just do that and then some lighter ones there. So this version, if I now press Control Y, you can see how it's made. It's made as a shape, like a sausage, as opposed to a line, which then has the shape applied to it after. This actually is a physical shape. Now if I was to click this one and then go Object, Path, and then Outline Stroke, see, that turns what we did into what we've just created by just drawing. So to cut out this extra step, you can just ink using the blob brush tool Control Z that. And Control Y. If I just switch these around. Oh no, Control Y. I'm in isolation mode, sorry. Press escape to come out of that. Control Y, then we can see everything. Yeah. So the one on the left is just a normal paintbrush tool. The one on the right is the blob brush tool. And the reason it's good is if I just move this version out of the way, I can demonstrate something else to you. If I hit V, move it out of the way again. Another thing I'd like to point out is if you double click the blob brush, make sure that merge only with selection is ticked for the inking process. And then when we use the same brush for the colouring process, we untick this box. And I'll show you why. And as you can see on here, you've got the size, 6-point variation pressure. Obviously you can have the 3-point with a 3 variation as before, so you can create your own brushes that match. So if I just demonstrate this, if I was to go like that, overshoot the line, actually that's not a very good one, so overshoot the line, overshoot that line, and then overshoot that line, and then create these ones. By doing that, if I go into the Y, Control Y, you can see the overlaps. Now what is handy is that if you was to go and zoom in, use the lasso, I'm going to Control Y again so you can see everything. Use the lasso tool to select everything that we're adjusting here. And then if you hit the shape builder tool, it separates where they overlap. And if you hold down the Alt key or Option on a Mac, as you click on one of these end sections, it can remove them, so you can take away the overshoots. And if I click off, you can see how you can create artwork that way as well. So if I turn off this layer, so you can overshoot your artwork and then remove all the bits that you don't need. And one more bonus thing about using the blob brush is that if you use the eraser tool as a brush, you can then actually just erase straight into stuff. So you can just like soften certain edges if you wanted to. That was terrible. That's terrible. There we go. So you can use the eraser tool and erase bits and bobs as you go. So you can break things up. You can literally erase stuff. So it gives you a lot more options when you're doing your inking. So I just wanted to point out that for the inking section. But and as I mentioned for the colouring section, if we use the blob brush, if we're doing colouring like highlights and stuff, let me just choose a kind of pinky colour to demonstrate this. So if we use the blob brush and we double click on the blob brush icon, turn off that merge so that they're unticked at the top, what happens now is that when you're colouring, and then you do Control Y, you can see that that's one shape. And then if I colour again, and then Control Y, it's added that to the shape. So it's just creating one big shape. Okay. You can go over that. And it's just one big shape. And if I did exactly the same, but used the paintbrush tool, just click on the correct brush. So let's go on here. So we're using the normal paintbrush tool to try and achieve the same thing. What happens is that is what we're creating. So even though visually it looks good when you're doing this, when you look at how it's built up as a vector, there is many strokes, whereas here there's one stroke. So the file size will be better. and the editability is better. Again, using the eraser tool, you can just cut into this one and zoom in. You can see it's you can remove bits that you don't want, and it's still one big shape. Still one shape. If I come right down to here, it's still one shape. See? So it's A-shaped, and that just means it's a lot easier to use. So again, just hold the button down and you'll see the two different brushes. And once you've got one selected, if you double click, you've got the options. So when you're doing the inking, merge only with selection, and I'll demonstrate quickly what that means. So you've done one pass, if I control Y to show you it in outlines, but if I do another one on top of that to continue it, it treats it as a separate shape. Whereas the one below, with that item ticked on the menu, it keeps adding it to the shape. This one creates new shapes over the top, so you're creating a new shape over the top, which is why it's good for the inking, because you can then remove the overshoots by selecting everything as before, and then using the shape finder tool and then holding down Alt as you click on the section you want to remove, like that, and then I can click off, and there we go. So for inking it's great because you can remove sections, but for colouring you don't want all this to go on, you want it as one shape. And again, double click, turn that off, it doesn't merge, turn that on and it does. So with that unticked, it adds to the shape. And with that ticked, it creates a new shape over the top of it every time. Okay, so hopefully that helps with the inking and colouring. Just a little bonus tip. And now I'm going to go over some quick texture ideas for you. So here we are in Photoshop now, and what you can see is a photograph of a castle wall. It's a close-up of the wall. I quite like the texture and I thought I could use this in my vector artwork. So I will show you how to get this into a vector TIFF, a bitmap TIFF file that can be used in Illustrator. So first thing, what I normally do is I would duplicate a layer, and then with the layer selected I would go to an adjustment layer and choose black and white, and then I would also choose an adjustment layer and go levels and play around with these levels so you end up with something that you think would make a great texture. Depends how blown out you want it, but I mean, to me that looks pretty good. I quite like that, and I think we could use that. So what I will do now is hold down Shift and click on the layer, so all three of those are selected, and then I'll do Control E, and that merges them down into one layer. So we've got that, and that's the original. So with this one selected, now what we need to do is, if we're happy with that selection, with that texture, and we want to use that as an overlay, first thing we have to do is change the mode to grayscale, and then say merge and discard all the extra information. So that does get rid of your backup layer, but that's fine. And then the final step is to turn it into a bitmap. So go image mode, bitmap, flatten layers. I've changed this to 600 output just so that there's more detail stored in the image. Click OK. That's now been converted. The final step is to export this, so you go save as, and then I've done it as castle texture. I'll save over the top of that one. So castle texture as a TIFF, so make sure file type is TIFF, because there are other options in there, but you want this TIFF option. We already know it's a bitmap because we already converted it to bitmap, so this is a bitmap TIFF. Click save, I'll replace it, so we're using the same file. I don't change any of these settings, just hit OK, and it will now export the bitmap TIFF. Now here we are back in Illustrator, and I'm going to show you. So here we are back in Illustrator, and the castle texture is here. So what I've done here is on the little piggy on piano artwork, I've created a new layer above the scan, and I've got my artwork on just so you can see it. But I'm on this layer that I've just created, and what I'm going to do is just grab my castle texture that I've my bitmap TIFF, drag it over and let go, and it places it into the artwork. Now what we do is, using the selection tool, we can move this around. If we go to free transform, we can click and drag out this image, hold down shift to constrain the proportions, and this can be used to create a nice textured background. Now I will quickly demonstrate how I would do that by creating a rectangle in the background here, changing the colour of this rectangle to, say, red. That's quite good. And then what we do is we can grab this, if I hit move to front, arrange, bring to front, that places it there. I'm going to now, with the texture selected, if you hit on the fill, it's not the stroke but it's the fill, and then you can change it to different colours. You see, you can actually pick any colour you want. So that's what's great about these textured TIFF images. So I can say OK to that. I can also go Control C to copy, Control F to paste in place. I can press E for my free transform, and I can rotate the whole thing on its side like that. And I can also go and change the colour of it slightly, so I can make it a slightly different version. There we go. Of the green. So you've got some crazy textured background now. And then what you can also do is, if you go into your layer, you can select the original rectangle, copy and paste it in place, drag the copy to the top of the layer, select the layers below it, which are the textures. So you've got you've got two textures and then the new rectangle. With that all selected, right click and make a clipping mask. And there it tidies it up to the actual artboard. And there's our crazy background textured image created by using a castle wall. So I hope that is of interest to you. You can use that in the background of many different images, obviously, to create textures and add a bit more depth and interest into your artwork.
Once again, thank you very much for tuning in, checking out these episodes, watching this mini-series, and hopefully you've taken away something that's helped you with your digital artwork. Please like and subscribe to the channel, because there will be future content, again, that might interest you, and it would be a shame if you missed out, wouldn't it? So once again, thanks for watching, and until next time, laters!